A monkey runs around. But the human being, Allah Azza wa Jalla created the human being for a great, great purpose. But sometimes we don't, because of the nature of life, we forget oftentimes about why it is in fact we even have a life. And that's why Allah Azza wa Jalla, one of the reasons why Allah Ta'ala, the creator of the heavens, the creator of the earth, the creator of what's manifest, the creator of what is hidden, the one who created everything from nothing, Al-Badi', the one who created the cosmos and the universe from absolutely nothing. I mean, think about that. Just before we go into the lecture, just think about that. How do you create something from nothing? You can make a mosque. You can get stones. You can get wood. You can get cement. You can get all the materials that you need to be able to make a mosque. You can do that, but you cannot produce the stones and the wood and the cement from nothing. You can't produce even a grain of rice from nothing. You have to have something. But Allah Ta'ala doesn't have to have anything. And He creates things from nothing. Kun fayakun. He says, be it is the Lord, the sustainer, the cherisher, the nourisher, the king, the master of the day of judgment. That's the God that I believe in. I became Muslim about 17 years ago. That's the Allah that I believe in. That's the one that I'm going to bring my faith on. And Allah Azza wa Jalla, He said in His book, Ista'id Billah, He said, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Allah said, and is continuing to say to us, that fasting was written upon you. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ. Fasting has been written upon you, has been prescribed for you. كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. As it was prescribed to those who came before you. But like fasting, like the object in the world, and like the human being, the fasting has a purpose. And Allah tells us the purpose of fasting, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you would be a people who are God conscious. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Fasting has been prescribed to you as it was prescribed to those who came before you, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, that you will be God conscious. But what is the nature of God consciousness? Taqwa is not fear. Allah has a word for fear, it's called khawf. But taqwa is a different thing. Taqwa is different. Taqwa is that you notice Him. Taqwa is that you are aware of Him. Taqwa is that you're conscious of Him. Taqwa is that you are in a state of awe, realizing His presence. Taqwa is that thing that if you are shielded, there's wiqaya, you are shielded from kullu ma siwahu. You are shielded from everything that is not Allah by virtue of the fact you are shielded from everything that is not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by a not to use a childish term, but by a force field that comes from your faith. Your faith builds and churns inside of your chest. And it literally, the energy of your faith pushes out and it forms a wiqaya. It forms a shield between you and that which is not Allah. The early stages of that is it forms a shield between you and what Allah told you not to do. But in the later stages of that, taqwa is that it forms a shield between you and kullu ma siwahu, and everything that is not Allah. It protects the fortress of the heart. The heart is for la ilaha illallah. As He said subhanahu wa ta'ala in Hadith Qudsi, that the heavens cannot contain me and the earth cannot contain me, but the heart of my believing slave can contain me. So that heart there has to be a fortress around that heart, and that fortress is called taqwa. But before we get to that point, Allah said that I've given you the fast so that you will achieve this maqam. I have given you this fast so that you will achieve this station. I have given you this fast so that you will reach to this level. Understand that the ibadat is there to bring us to Allah Azza wa Jalla in levels. Our worship is to bring us to God, to the creator of the world in levels, in stages. As the Quran was revealed in 23 years. Likewise, this deen is true, it's a process. And by virtue of practicing and by virtue of coming close to Allah, Allah takes you up in levels, takes you up in stages. The first of those stages is the stage of Islam. The first of those stages is the stages of Islam. أن تشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وتقيم الصلاة وتؤتي الزكاة وتصوم رمضان وتحج البيت إن استطعت إليه سبيلا. That you would observe these 5 pillars. This is the first station between me and my Lord, me and Allah. That consciousness that we're talking about is not quite, this is the bud of that consciousness. You can imagine that deen, our relationship with Allah is like deen. You can imagine that it is a flower. In the beginning of that, there is nothing there. In the beginning, there's nothing there. There's just an open field. There's nothing there. But you water, and you add water, and you add water, and then when you add water, you find what do you call this? A stalk will come up, and you'll see the greenness come up from the ground. Then you realize there's a plant. I have something here. And then you continue to water it more. And when you water it more, that plant grows into a bud. And then you water it more, and when that bud matures, it turns into a flower. The first stage is called Islam. That first stage, or should I say that before that point, everyone has a field. Every human being has a field. And that field has the potential to produce that flower. But if you look at most people, there's nothing there. It's just soil. It doesn't mean that it can't be there. It just means that it's not there at this time. When you water that, the first thing that comes up is called Islam. The second of that which comes up, and when that grows up, it becomes what's called Iman. When you water that more, and you grow that more, that's called Ihsan. And you realize the whole time that thing that you were looking at was always a flower. May Allah make us people of, may Allah make us beautiful flowers. So the first stage of that is called Islam. The first stage of my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is fueled by God consciousness, the first stage of that is called Tawbah. The first stage of that is Tawbah. That you realize, when you look at your situation and you look at your state, Allah told you, اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. They were talking about taqwa right now, and Allah said to us to fear or to be conscious of God in the way that is appropriate for Him, and do not die except for in the state of Iman. When Allah told you and charged you and I, when He told us to be conscious of Him, according to what His right is, anyone who's awake, anyone who's conscious enough to think, anyone who even begins to try to practice Islam realizes that God consciousness that God asked me for, I don't have it. What can a person do except make tawbah at that point? Of course you make tawbah. It's the first step. Of course you make tawbah, because you realize I'm not able to give God His right. But the reality of tawbah is that you make tawbah from tawbah. The reality of tawbah is that you make tawbah from tawbah and realize that I'm not making the tawbah. Allah is creating the tawbah in me. Innahu huwa tawwabu rahim. Verily Allah, He is the one who causes the hearts to turn. And He is al-Rahim. Only thing I did was bring my niyyah. Innama al-a'malu bin-niyyat. I bring my niyyah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah takes that niyyah. Innahu huwa tawwabu rahim. And He ta'ala is the one who will produce that tawbah. He produces that tawbah from nothing. I had nothing, and Allah produced tawbah from that. When a person establishes that tawbah in their life and they move forward, they go into it, and this is the first. We'll call this a manzil. This is the first of the way stations. As I began talking, I said we're going to talk about the stations with God. And if we have enough time, we'll be able to get to the ahwal, the states that come over us every day. He said, Allah told us to say, Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. Establish us or guide us on the straight path. But in reality, mustaqim doesn't mean straight, it actually means upright. But that's another lecture. Istiqamah is to continue in Allah after losing everything but Him. What do I mean by that? Istiqamah is that once you have realized that God has produced this tawbah in you, that suddenly you're crying, suddenly you feel sadness, suddenly a light has come on. Istiqamah is then that you continue in that light. You continue in Allah. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَمَعَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Those who strive in us, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا, they strive in us, meaning that they realize that, oh Allah, here I am coming to you, but I can't come to you unless you come to me first. Oh Allah, here I am coming to you, but I can't come to you unless you bring me along. What are these pitiful legs going to do? What are this pitiful leg going to do? What is this pitiful niyyah going to do? I cannot go to you unless I go through you. Allah so carry me. And that niyyah, and that constant, because the istiqamah is a constant turning back. It's a constant turning back. And only a fool will try to go to Allah. No, only a fool will try to go to anything in this world without Allah. Anything you try to do through yourself, you'll find very difficult. But what you try to do through Allah, you'll find very easy. And going through Allah to achieve Allah, don't you think Allah will give you everything else? This is called istiqamah, to continue in it. And then at that point, that's when Allah gives you this thing called taqwa. That's when Allah gives you this thing called God consciousness. And the reality of taqwa is that you realize that you have you realize. The reality of taqwa is that you realize every time you slip and forget about Him, every time you slip and you forget about Him, that the only thing that brought you back into thinking about Him was Him. That's called taqwa. It's you're conscious of what's actually happening. You're conscious of the fact. If Allah gives us these different way stations, we have covered the station of Islam, and now we are going into the station of Iman. And so that person is what you call a Muslim. And the next level is the level of the mu'min, the person of Iman. May Allah make us mu'mineen. The first stage of that is called sidq. The first stage of Iman is called sidq, and that is singleness of purpose. A sadiq is the one who has a single purpose and never turns their face away from that. Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he's called a Siddiq because he had that quality of sidq, that he believed in the Prophet ﷺ before the Prophet said anything. When the Prophet ﷺ told him he was the messenger of God, Sayyidina Abu Bakr's response was, I know. He said about him that no one brought faith on me without first having doubt, except for Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. In other words, this station is a station of singleness of purpose. You see something, you know something, and you never relent from that thing. You see something, and you know something, and you never relent from that thing. And if you want to know about sidq, there are people who work for this dunya like that. There are people who work for this dunya like that. They have sidq in their dunya. Whether they're tired or whether they're hungry, whether they have money or they don't have money, whether they're happy or whether they're sad, they strive for dunya and they never give up. They lose friends over it, they lose family over it, they lose themselves over it, and they don't care. What about the person that will strive for the one who created that dunya? An individual who has a true heart, an individual who is awake, has that kind of singleness of purpose, and they aim it for Allah. Allah, I believe in you. Allah, I trust in you. Allah, I rely on you. Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. Allah is my suffice, and what a trustee He is. When the problem comes, Allah. When the ease comes, Allah. When there's wealth, Allah. When there's poverty, Allah. When there is happiness, Allah. And when there's sadness, Allah. That is sidq. That's called sidq. When you want to make ibadah, Allah. When you don't want to make ibadah, Allah. Taraweeh is the 11th rak'ah, and your legs are, your naps are screaming at you, go home. You keep facing Allah. That's called sidq. That's the quality of the mu'min. May Allah make us mu'mineen. If you have that, if you achieve that, if you have that, and if Allah manifests that on you, and you continue to show thanks, by continuing to go towards Him, He'll give you this thing called ikhlas. Ikhlas is to know that actions are not from you, they're not for you, nor are they to you. Ikhlas is to know that actions are not from you. هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَكُمْ وَمَا تَعْمَلُونَ. Allah said in the Quran, He is the one who created you and what you do. Those actions are not coming from you. These actions are created things. Allah creates them. The only thing that you and I have in our actions is our niyyah. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Actions are but by intentions. So you bring your niyyah, and Allah causes the good that you do, the good that you do, the amal that you bring, the salat that you read, the salat that you pray, and the Quran that you read, and the dhikr that you make, and more importantly perhaps in this environment, and the people that you help outside, the people whose life you make better outside, those actions that are coming from your limbs, Ikhlas is to see through them and not to be veiled by what you do. The mukhlis doesn't even see their actions. You ask the mukhlis, subhanAllah, you did such a great thing. The mukhlis doesn't even remember what you're talking about. The mukhlis says, I don't know, but I do know Allah is greater than me. To know that actions are not from you, nor for you, nor are they to you. And if you have that state, and if you show appreciation, Allah will give you this thing called tuma'anina. Tuma'anina is that you have tranquility in the heart. You have tranquility in the heart. Because you realize there's no good that you can do, and there's no bad that you can do, but that Allah is greater. There's no good that you can do, and there's no bad that you can do, except that you know that Allah is greater. And that knowing that your master is the greatest, and knowing that your master is control, and knowing that your master has the dominion in his hand. Who would you be afraid of other than Allah? This causes a person to have tranquility and to build peacefulness in their heart. If a person achieves that, if Allah gives that to that person, and He'll give that to anyone He wants, that's the grace of Allah, He gives to whoever He wants. At that point, this person becomes part of the muhsineen. This is called ihsan. The first stage of ihsan, the first place of excellence, the first place of ihsan is called muraqabah, that you have surveillance. And that's that the heart be connected to Allah at all times. The heart is looking for Allah at all times. The heart is looking for His beloved at all times. When you're in love with something, you think about that thing and you ponder that thing and you contemplate that thing at all times. When someone is in love with God, when someone is in love with Allah, that person looks for Allah at all times. Looking for Him, looking for His signs. Isn't Allah al-Jami'? Isn't Allah al-Jami'? Isn't Allah the one who gathers? Isn't this a gathering? Isn't that Allah's name? Al-Jami'. Then you can see from this gathering the name of Allah. Al-Jami'. Isn't everyone here alive? Isn't His name Al-Hayy? That's Allah's name, the one who gives life. There are some of us in this room, particularly myself, who was dead at a time. And Allah is Al-Muhyi, He's the giver of life. Isn't that Allah? All we have around us at all times are Allah's names, just pointing to us, indicating Him to us, showing us Himself. Al-Awwal wal-Akhir wal-Zahir wal-Batin. He is the first, He is the last, He's the manifest, and He's the hidden. So the person of muraqabah is in surveillance. The person of muraqabah is looking for Allah. And if you're thankful, and if you press forward, Allah will give you another thing. This is called mushahada. And mushahada is seeing the truth with one's bare eyes. How important is mushahada? How does one become Muslim? What do you say? You say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. When I came into Islam, I was told to say these words, I bear witness there's no God but God. And I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God. Now, how are you going to bear witness to something that you haven't seen? How can you possibly bear witness to something? Mushahada is with your eyes. How do you bear witness to something that you haven't seen? One of two things is happening. Either every time someone takes shahada, they're making a false claim, or they're stating a claim and they're hoping to reach a state. You cannot be a witness unless you have mushahada. You cannot truly say, I bear witness there's no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. You cannot truly bear witness to that until you have seen the signs of Allah with your bare eyes. Until you have seen the signs of Rasulullah with your bare eyes. You can't say that. And if you move forward, and if Allah increases you, and if you show more appreciation, the appreciation to every level is called ta'ah. The appreciation in every level is obedience. And if you obey, if you show thankfulness, Allah will give you the final stage, which is the stage of ma'rifah. فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ Know that there is no God but God. It's a commandment. فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ Know that there is no God but God. This is the last level of ihsan. This is the final stage of the muhsin. This is called deen. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Fasting was written upon you as it was written upon those who came before you, so that you will be God conscious and understand that God consciousness is part of a state. It's part of a state. And what fasting does to a person is it produces in them states. And the states produce stations. And the stations produce closeness to Allah. The first station is called Islam. The second station is called Iman. And the final station is called Ihsan. May Allah make us muhsineen. Now traveling these different stations, and in Ramadan you start to taste that. You feel different in Ramadan as you did outside of Ramadan. But that difference is not something that's limited to Ramadan. But Ramadan only shows you the nature of the spiritual path. That this is the way you're supposed to move forward. You abstain. You stop indulging. You abstain from the world, this life in the way that you were living it before, because you're going to die. You're going to leave this world. Traveling these different stations of Islam and Iman and Ihsan is a daily activity. Now, alhamdulillah, we have enough time to talk about about the daily activity. Now, Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says in His book, "Asta'id billah, wa yas'alunaka 'anil ruh, qul ar-ruhu min amri rabbi, wa ma utitum min al-'ilmi illa qalila." They are asking you concerning the spirit. Yas'alunaka 'anil ruh. They're asking you about the spirit. Say the spirit is part of the affairs of Allah. When the heart is removed from the body becomes useless. When the heart, in other words, when an individual dies, the soul is taken out from that person, and you see that body has no use. And what you know about a person is their soul. You identify them by their soul. You don't know someone by their body, because the body is constantly changing. You don't know someone by their mind, because the mind is always changing. You don't know someone by their name, because their name is always changing. I mean, it can change. I wasn't born with the name Abdul Latif, but I'm still the same person. But rather, you know someone because of their soul. And the truth and the matter behind that is that when someone dies, when someone leaves this world, that soul is no longer there. You don't know that body laying there. No matter how much you love someone, no matter how close you are to them, when that person dies, you want that body out of your house. Because that body is not the person. No, your soul is who you are. So understand how important it is. The Quran mentions that there are 6 different states of the soul. In other words, you and I have 6 different states. And these 6 different states are what dictate where we are in terms of our closeness or our proximity to Allah. They dictate to us our Islam, they dictate to us our Iman, they dictate to us our Ihsan. Didn't Allah say, وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ رَبِّي إِنَّ رَبِّي غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Indeed, the soul is certainly prone to evil, except the one on which my Lord bestows His mercy. This is the first of the states of my soul. The first state of the soul, as Allah mentioned in the book, this first, who I am originally, is I'm in a state where my soul commands towards evil. If Allah puts light inside the heart, if Allah puts light inside the heart, if Allah puts the reality of the fact that I'm going to leave this world and I'm going to be taken to another place, if God's presence shines in a person's life, Allah talks about that soul and He says, لا أقسم بيوم القيامة ولا أقسم بالنفس اللوامة. He said, will I not swear by the resurrection day? Will I not swear by the blaming soul? If Allah puts light inside that heart, as I said, and that heart shows appreciation, because Ramadan is about moving forward, and moving forward is not limited to 1 month, but rather it's moving forward is every day of one's life. If Allah puts light inside of a person's heart, that person will start to blame themselves. Why am I doing this? And why am I doing that? This is called qalb. Qalb. A person who has a qalb, they have taqallub inside himself. One day they're obeying, one day they're disobeying. One day they're going towards Allah, the next day they're going back. They have taqallub, they're going back and forth. That's nafs al-lawwama. And that person with that self, they blame themselves. And they say, look at what I'm doing. Look at what I'm doing. Nafs al-lawwama. But it's so precious, Allah swears by it. If a person goes forward, and if a person shows appreciation, Allah will give them that contentment. May Allah give us contentment in our souls. You can't content a person just by making sure that they have the clothes that they need. You can't content a person by making sure that they have the wealth that they desire. You can't content a person just by giving them promises. Because how many people have wealth? How many people have been given promises? How many people have everything that they want, but they're not content individuals? Contentment is a gift that comes from Allah. May Allah make us content. الذين آمنوا وتطمئن قلوبهم بذكر الله ألا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب. Allah talks about those and He says, and those who content their heart with the remembrance of Allah, indeed by remembrance of Allah their hearts achieve contentment. May Allah make us. But the question that comes, and every time we mention this, the question that comes is how does the remembrance of Allah cause the heart to be content? How can that possibly be so? How is it that you just say Allah, or you say La ilaha illallah, or you say Astaghfirullah, or you send Salah on the Nabi alayhi salatu, or you do any of these kind of movements? How is it that it makes the heart content? Yeah, inshallah, come forward, inshallah. People want to come to the masjid to hang out. I hear you. But not today. Bismillah. Come close. Do you know you know the big clocks, those clocks that swing back and forth? If it's true that if you take if you have a room and you put clocks like that all throughout the room, and you put those clocks at different times. In other words, the pendulum is swinging at different times. It's true that after a period of time, those pendulums will all swing in unison. You don't have to touch the clock. You don't have to go over there and adjust it. There's something about gravity, there's something about physics, that when you put those clocks together like that, so one swinging like this, the other one is, how do you do this? One swinging like this. That's pretty good. But they're swinging out of, they're not in balance, they're not in tune, they're not in harmony. It's true that if you put all those clocks together in a room, and you leave them for some time, that eventually they'll all be swinging at the same time. This is the nature of the objects in this world. When you sit together, when you sit close together, your hearts will become unified. This is why when you pray the salah, the imam is always getting on your case about making sure there's no gaps in the line, making the line straight, and so that the hearts will be in unison. Unity is so important. So when we come to the masajid, a lot of times, we want to be comfortable. I understand that, but it's important to get close together. It's important to shake hands. It's important to ask how people are doing. It's important to smile, especially if you have a better smile than this one. Allah said about that individual though, that when you make mention of Allah, the question that comes to mind is that, look, dhikr, what's the big deal? You know, you have some beads and you say Allah, Allah. I have too much stuff to do. Why does it matter? I'll tell you why it matters. Allah asked us the question before He put us in this world. He asked us, Alastu bi rabbikum? He said, am I not your Lord? Qalu, humanity answered back and said, Bala, indeed. Now, the humans, the soul, the individual that was standing before Allah, when the soul was standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the soul was at peace. The soul was able to answer Allah indeed, because it had relished, it had taken in, it had drank in, it had absorbed the presence of God. And in that presence of God, it saw the ultimate beauty. Allahu Jameel wa yuhibbul jamal. Allah is beautiful and He loves beauty. So when that soul was standing there, it saw perfection. And now when that soul comes in this world, the soul looks for perfection. The soul looks for fulfillment because it saw perfection. It was fulfilled. So when that soul comes in this world, it looks for what it knew. And that's why human beings, we chase after this dunya the way that we do, is because we're looking for Allah and don't know where He is. We're looking for fulfillment, but can't find it. When you say Allah's name, the soul is reminded of its past. The soul is reminded of who it is. The soul is reminded of who Allah is. The soul is reminded of its worth. The soul is given tranquility because it's put back in its proper place. You want to know how the soul feels when we don't make the dhikr of Allah? The way your body feels in Ramadan. Those first 3-4 days of Ramadan, if you don't prepare for that, especially in England, I never fasted like this before. When you go further north, you know, it's like 9:30 is iftar. Or you say iftari. It's iftar. 9:30 is iftar there. Those first 3 or 4 days, you feel like, oh my God. I have a problem, I drink too much coffee. I really like coffee a whole lot. I mean, a little too much. I drink espresso. I drink too much of it. Way too much. I made a mistake this year. I didn't prepare myself for the fasting. The first 3 days I was going through caffeine withdrawals. Do you know? If you drink a lot of tea, if you don't drink tea, what happens? You get a headache. Well, my whole body felt like a headache. I had a headache in every limb of my body. I had a headache in my arms. I had a headache in my back. Anyway, now the soul, when the soul comes into this world, it has withdrawals too. When the soul comes in this world, it has Allah withdrawals. And if a person pays attention to their soul, they'll give the soul the drink that it wants. Like how I wanted coffee in the beginning of Ramadan. That drink is called Allah. But if you don't have that if you don't have Allah in your life, soon, just like after 3 or 4 days, I haven't drank coffee in the entire month of Ramadan. Not even in iftar. I made a deal with myself that this year you're going to taste it. This year you're going to taste it. Okay, you're not going to eat food, that's fine, but you're not going to have any coffee. My nafs screamed, "What are you trying to do? You're being an extremist. Take it easy, take it easy, we haven't done anything wrong to you." I said, "You be quiet." But after 3 or 4 days, isn't it true? After 3 or 4 days, isn't it true that you will not have those pains anymore? It's the same thing with the soul. After some time, if you don't listen to the soul crying, it stops crying. If the soul's like that, after years in this world, if you don't give it that drink, it gives up, it dies. So the same way that I have coffee withdrawals in the beginning of the month, the same way the soul has Allah withdrawals. And if I give it something to drink, I will be able to maintain my addiction in this world. I'm addicted to Allah. But if I don't feed that addiction, it's a positive addiction. If I don't give it that shot, if I don't give it that drink, my soul will die and it will forget. And it will become just like anything in this world. I'll become just like a zombie, a body walking around with no soul. So how can it be that just saying Allah's name, that can make the heart tranquil? Because you're giving the heart what it wants. It wants Allah. May Allah make us zakirin and zakirat. May Allah make us those who remember Him, male and female. What did He say? يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي عبادي وادخلي جنتي. يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة. So in this verse, and actually don't say verse. Do you know what a verse is? A verse is a line in poetry. Quran is not poetry. Don't say verse. Say sign. One of the signs of Allah. At this point, Allah mentions 3 consecutive states of the heart. Ya ayyatuha an-nafsul mutma'inna. Once the soul feels a sense of tranquility, once the soul feels a sense of tranquility which comes by being in the presence of Allah, there is no difference between the name and the name. When you say Allah's name, listen, there is no difference between the name and the name. I'll give you an example. If you cooperate with me, if you want to, close your eyes for a second. I'm going to say a word, elephant. What did you see in your head? Or you can open your eyes now. Sorry. What did you see in your head? Did you see a donkey? Did you see a giraffe? What did you see? You saw an elephant because, what did I push an elephant into your head? What did I say? I just said elephant. Words are signs. They point to things bigger than themselves. So when you say the word elephant, you're going to see an elephant in your mind. Now here's something amazing about God's presence. When you say the word Allah, there's no image. There's no image. But you still know and you still remember. You still know and you still remember. So when you say Allah, 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 just enough. Say it enough. Say it enough. Your heart will recall. Your heart will remember, just like your brain remembers the elephant. Because there's no difference between the name and the named. That's why he said, Ana jalisu man dhakarani. Ta'ala, he said. Ana jalisu man dhakarani. I am the sitting companion of the one who remembers me. You say Allah's name, He's with you in a way He's not with you when you don't. Ana jalisu man dhakarani. أنا عند ظن عبدي بي وأنا معه إذا ذكرني في نفسه ذكرته في نفسي. Allah is so great. Allah is so great and He's so kind. He said, I am to my slave as my slave thinks of me. أنا عند ظن عبدي بي. I am to my slave as he thinks of me. وأنا معه إذا ذكرني. And I am with him if he says my name, if he mentions me. إذا ذكرني في نفسه ذكرته في نفسي. And Allah even says, and if he remembers him, if he remembers me in himself, I remember him in myself. وإذا ذكرني في ملأ ذكرته في ملأ أعلى منه وخير منه, depending on the narration. And he said, if he remembers me in a gathering, I remember him in a gathering better than that. Why do people have a problem with dhikr in jama'ah? I don't know why. Allah makes dhikr in jama'ah. He said, I remember him in a gathering better than the one he's in. He even mentions his prophet, peace be upon him, in jama'ah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَمَلَائِكَتَهُ يُصَلُّونَ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا صَلُّوا عَلَيْهِ وَسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا. Verily Allah and His angels, they send salawat upon the Prophet. So then He commands us to do the same thing. Allah and His angels, that's the jama'ah. I don't know where people get their understanding. It's called misunderstanding. Open the Quran and you'll see everything. May Allah make us people of Quran. Ya ayyatuha an-nafsul mutma'inna. Oh, tranquil soul. The soul is tranquil. It's not fighting Allah anymore. Remember that thing called taqwa. You're conscious of Allah. And you become so conscious of Allah to the point where you're not conscious of yourself anymore. You're so conscious of Allah, you're not conscious of yourself anymore. The same kind of consciousness you have, for example, when you go to that door, like he's going to push the door. Boom, you push the door open. I guarantee you that he did not think about that movement. He just did it because you have to push the door to get open. Some people, they're with Allah like that. They think of themselves as much as they do that door being open. Just like that. Door opens, door closes. The amount of thought you put into that. That's the amount of thought they put into their own presence in this world. Yes, they're here. Yes, they do it. But the rest is for Allah. When the soul has that kind of consciousness that it doesn't seriously ponder anything but the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how can it not be tranquil? The reason why the souls are not tranquil, the reason why the souls are bothered is because they're thinking about everything but Allah. My bills make me agitated. My family sometimes makes me agitated. My wife might make me agitated. The people make me agitated. Sometimes the mosque might make me agitated. We're human. All all of that is ghayrullah. All of that is other than Allah. When all that stuff gets inside your head, all that stuff gets inside your heart, of course you're going to be anxious. Of course you're going to be anxious because it's not supposed to be there. This heart is the masjid. This is where you make sujood. The sajda you make with your head is not, look, that sajda you make with your head is temporary. The sajda you make with your head is temporary, but the sajda you make with your heart is forever. This is the masjid. This is the masjid here. The masjid you've been commanded to, that you make salat in, and the sujood you've been commanded to make, that you do with your body is a temporary sajda. But the real sajda that you make, that is the heart of the sajda you do with your body, that's the sajda of tuma'nina. You make sujood to Allah because you're tranquil with Him. Allah, I don't know why you're doing this, but I believe. Allah, I don't know why you've chosen this, but I submit. Allah, I don't know why you make things this way, but I give in. That's why one of the arkan, one of the pillars of the prayer is that you have tranquility. You pray salat like this, Allahu Akbar. Or like this. Right. And you have tranquility. Be calm. Be calm. Know that Allah is taking care of you. He's going to take care of you. He's going to take care of your family. He's going to take care of all your problems. All you have to do is just show up for the game. Allah told you that you have to work. Fine. Let's just show up for the game. Let Allah do the rest. That heart that's tranquil is a heart that's in submission. You said Allah, you said to the Prophet فَإِنَّ حَسْبَكَ اللَّهِ. And verily your suffice is Allah. Allah is enough for you. You said that to the Prophet ﷺ, I follow the Prophet ﷺ, and I believe what you told him. That's called sidq. Allah suffices. Allah is enough for me. Of course you're going to be calm. Of course you're going to be tranquil. May Allah make us calm. May Allah make us tranquil. May Allah put peace in our heart. You know, that kind of peace, that kind of tranquility that other people that look at you and they say, look, I don't care about what you call your religion. I don't care about what country that you're from. I don't care about what language that you speak. I don't care about the accent that you might or might not have. I don't care about your foods. I don't care about the way you dress. I don't care about any of that kind of stuff. All I know is I want what you have. I want what you have. I want that tranquility that's in your face. I want it in my life. I want it in my wife's wife. I want it in my kid's life. I want it in my area. Tell me what I have to do. Oh, you want what I have? Say ashhadu. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Now follow me. قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمْ اللَّهُ وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُمْ Say, if you love Allah, then follow me. That's the Prophet ﷺ. If you love Allah, then follow me. Following the Prophet ﷺ is not limited to the garments that one wears, or how someone drinks something, or how they make supplication, or the way that they marry, or the way that they divorce. It's not limited to that beautiful sunnah. May Allah bring all the sunnahs in our life. But the inward sunnah of Rasulullah is that he can da'iman ma'Allah. He was always with Allah. Sayyidatuna Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she used to say that at night time the lovers go to the one that they love. And the Prophet went to the one that he loves. He used to stand in the night time and pray. When Sayyidatuna Aisha, when she saw the hal, the state of the maqam of Sayyidina Rasulullah, she said to him, Ya Rasulullah, why do you pray like this? She said, Ya Rasulullah, why do you pray like this? Why do you stand this way? Your feet are cracking. You've stood so much that your feet are cracking. He used to have tears would come down his blessed beard and drop onto his chest. She said, Ya Rasulullah, she was worried. At the end of the day, that's her husband. And she sees what he's doing and how he's doing it. And she's out of her care and her concern for him, she said, Ya Rasulullah, why do you do this when Allah has forgiven everything that you might have done and everything that you will do? And understand that is an interesting, that's an indication there. Because she was speaking emphatically. She was stressing the point because she knew very well that a prophet cannot commit sin. And Allah has forgiven everything that he's done, peace be upon him, and he can't even do anything. That's how much Allah loves him. What was his response, peace be upon him? How did he respond? He said, أَفَلَا أَكُنْ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا. Should I not be a thankful servant? Should I not be a thankful servant? That's the kind of thing that the slave who's tranquil with God says. The slave who's at peace with Allah, that's what they say. The slave that has put their affair in Allah's hands, that's what they say. Do you worship Allah for paradise? No. Do you worship Allah because you're afraid of hell? No. Do you worship Allah because you want the rewards that He's promised you? No. Why do you worship Allah? Because I love Him too much. I worship Allah because I love Him too much and I want Him. I'm His slave, He can do what He wants to do with me. You know, when you put a body up for the janazah, there's a beautiful example. You should wash someone. If you have the opportunity to wash a body, do so. Because I will teach you many things. One of the things that it teaches you is that is the way that I'm supposed to be with my Allah. That body, if the water is too cold, what will that body do? Nothing. If that water is too hot, what will that body do? Nothing. If they want to turn that body this way or that way, what will that body, and can the body resist? Can the body refuse? The same way the heart has to be with Allah. Tranquil. Allah, do what you want with me. I'm your slave. Not only do what you want with me, but whatever it is that you want to do with me, ya Allah, I'm thankful. Just like my teacher, for those of you who didn't come, I was talking about one of my teachers. Those of you who were here, they came later. I'm re-emphasizing the point. That I had one of my teachers, he lost his son, 13 years old, just a few weeks ago. I called him, and I was at his house in the beginning of that month. So I was at his house about a month ago. I saw his son, 13. His son, a really beautiful kid. He gave us tea. He came out with a little tea and gave it to us. So I found out that he died, and I called him, and I gave like condolences, and he said we have to be thankful for everything. That's what shukr is about. That's what shukr is not just saying. Shukr is not just saying when Allah gives you something you say thank you. No, thank you Allah. No, shukr is that you see the wisdom and you appreciate every single thing that Allah is doing with you because you know it's the best thing for you. Ya ayyatuhan nafsul mutma'inna. Irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyah. Allah gives permission to the tranquil soul. Allah gives permission to the soul that is tranquil and at peace with Him to come to Him. Because that soul is pleasing and that soul is pleased. And so what does Allah say to it? فَاذْكُرْنِي فِي عِبَادِي. So then come then into my paradise. No, come then into my worship. This is called ubudiyyah. This is called worship. فَاذْكُرْنِي فِي عِبَادِي. Then come then into my worship with that thankful soul, that tranquil soul. وَادْخُلِي جَنَّتِي. And enter into my paradise. I have one last question to ask you before we break our fast. And it's a question, please respond. What is the paradise of paradise? Allah. May Allah give you Allah. Because you nailed it. The paradise of paradise is Allah Himself. And that's why He said, وَادْخُلِي جَنَّتِي. Enter then into my paradise. The paradise of Allah. There are some people in this world that they realize that, you know what, Allah, if you want to give me paradise and it means I can't be with you, you can keep your paradise. Because you're the only paradise that I want. Those are the people who are madly in love. May Allah make us people who are in love. Barakallahu feekum. Inshallah, we'll end our talk at this point. May Allah accept our fast. May Allah accept your fast. May Allah accept my fast. Barakallahu feekum. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursalin. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum.